Seja bem-vindo, espectador da Eleven. O nosso convidado de hoje não foi campeão do mundo de Fórmula 1, tem como melhor classificação um segundo lugar no campeonato de 2001. Está em Portugal a convite da Heineken para assistir ao Heineken Grande Prémio de Portugal. David Coulthard, David, welcome to Portugal. It's good to be back.
It's fantastic. You know, I did so much of my early racing here, my early testing. Actually, everything that I learned before Formula One was done in Estoril. And of course, we're not going to Estoril this year. We're going to Portimao, but I drove there in DTM, and I think you know the drivers, their eyes are going to be on stocks. It's going to be a little bit like the experience we had in Mugello this year.
We will talk about your first win here and your first rookie test. But 12 years after you finished your career, do you still miss, or you miss that adrenaline?
I don't actually. I was talking to Pedro Lamy before we started the interview, and he's still been active, he's still racing. And I was explaining that I think because I had such a rich opportunity in Formula One, I was, unlike Pedro, I had good teams, good cars, right from the very beginning. So at the end of my journey, at the end of my 15 seasons, I had no sort of feeling that I could have done more or what would have happened had I had a better car. I had the best cars, and the best I could do was to finish second to Schumacher in the championship. So in the end, I was able to retire from Formula One and move on to the next phase of my life.
But you maintain this connection with the Formula One.
Yeah, because I saw opportunity, of course, and you know, I come from an entrepreneurial family, and when I grew up watching Formula One, mainly with my father, I remember when I was 14, he said to me, "Son, when you get to Formula One," he didn't say if, he was so confident I would get to Formula One. He said, you know, two pieces of advice. I think one, you should live in Monte Carlo because it's more, let's say, logistically convenient for travel. And he also said that if you're lucky, you'll have a 10-year career. And we were listening to James Hunt and Murray Walker in the UK at that time. He said James Hunt, as an ex-driver, went into television and then had another career post-driving. So I'd actually signed to work with the BBC at that time, halfway through my last year in Formula One. And then a year into retirement, I was part of forming a new production company, Whisper TV, and today we are the producer and the person that, or the people that produce the show for Channel 4, amongst many other sports. So I've enjoyed being involved in business beyond being a driver.
How do you see the evolution of Formula One since you stopped your career?
Well, hybrid has been the main dominant factor, I guess, since I stopped in Formula One, and also Pirelli tyres. Pirelli, in fairness, don't have any competition, and they were asked at a certain point to try and make the races more interesting by producing high degradation tyres. But I think that, you know, if you listen to the drivers, they don't particularly speak fondly of how they have to manage the tyres. There's a lot of thermal degradation, they're not able to push hard every single lap of the Grand Prix. Clearly the cars have got heavier. When I retired, they were 605 kilograms. They're now 735 kilograms because nothing is for nothing. Of course, the hybrid technology is incredible technology. They are the most efficient engines in the world in terms of what they can deliver in horsepower per the amount of fuel they use. So from a science project point of view, Formula One continues to be the absolute benchmark in what is capable. But that said, you're overcoming the weight of the car by producing more power, putting wider tyres, putting more downforce. And if you look at the difference between qualifying and the race, very often it's 7 or 8 seconds in lap time difference, where when I was racing, the difference at the start of the Grand Prix might be 2 seconds relative to qualifying. So the races were more like sprints.
Looking to this season, 2020, we've had Max winning, Pierre winning, but the other winnings were from Lewis or Valtteri. Do you think this winning after winning from Mercedes could be a very big problem for Formula One?
Yeah, I think even Mercedes would recognise that it's not good to win every race. You need to show competition. You need to show that you can be vulnerable. It's emotion. You know, sports, and especially the business of Formula One, of course, is about showing your capabilities and trying to produce technically the best car. But you need light and shade. You need highs and lows to take people on an emotional roller coaster. And if you want people to be talking about it the next day at work or the next evening in the pub, talking about the referee giving a red card when he shouldn't have, or whether Lewis should have got a penalty. Sport needs to have that emotion that brings people together, and therefore I think the Mercedes, of course, they want to win the championship, and it's for Red Bull and Ferrari and Renault and all of the great teams that are out there to build the package which is capable of beating them. But we do need close races like we've seen on a few occasions this year.
If you want something like that, you can stay here in Portugal, because all the TVs, all the evenings are trying to have that question about football. Why the red card? Why the yellow card? So how do you evaluate the work that Liberty Media is making in the Formula One?
I think that we can all acknowledge that Liberty have come with a clean piece of paper in terms of what their vision for Formula One going forward is. There's certain things they've inherited. They've inherited the rules and regulations dictated by FIA and agreed in the Concord Agreement, and some legacy agreements. But what they have done, I think, is opened up Formula One to new audience. And as bad as COVID-19 has been for the world, it was actually a great opportunity for Formula One and for Liberty to showcase their e-gaming and their e-sports credentials. I think that's brought a younger generation of viewers. I have an 11-year-old son, and of course he's growing up in a house where his father was a racing driver, so he talks about racing, he's racing karts, and he would like to race in the future in cars, but he doesn't watch all the Grand Prix. But what he does do is game. He's playing on his simulator. So I think we need to recognize that it's not just about people of my generation or your generation or younger. We need to be able to be competing for the younger generation and to bring on that next group of fans.
Try to attract that next group. Talking about, this car, Honda is leaving the Formula One. Do you think this is a sign, and Formula One should try to bring new constructors to the championship?
I think Formula One has always tried to be open to new constructors, but the evidence has been there that we haven't had any new constructors coming in for several years. The cost of operation is a couple of $100 million a year to actually just service having the engines in Formula One. So I think we can agree the costs have become unsustainable, and if you're a manufacturer like Honda or whoever you want to look at, they're under pressure to sell road cars, and the marketing potential of Formula One is obviously huge. Otherwise, sponsors wouldn't be involved, and it's a global footprint that Formula One has. But does it really mean people are buying Mercedes cars on a Monday morning because Lewis is winning the race in Nürburgring? That's the question, and if the answer is no, then you can understand why manufacturers go, okay, we're going to invest their money in something that's more relevant to the customers that we have. Now, Honda have had great success with Red Bull and with AlphaTauri. They've had those victories. I think they've shown that they have come out of the difficult time they had with McLaren, but they've given notice that in a year and a half's time they'll be pulling out of Formula One. But a lot can change, and maybe if Red Bull are competing for the World Championship next year, maybe the board has a different decision.
Going back, here in Portugal we have a very big problem. A lot of people used to say that Formula One died with Ayrton Senna. What can you say about this?
Ayrton was the best driver in Formula One, and I still would say that Lewis and Michael would acknowledge that he had something really special. He wasn't just a fast racing driver, he was so much more. I remember when Williams announced him officially to the media, it was here in Portugal, and we were in a room, I can't remember, maybe you can remember which hotel, but we were in the hotel, and when Ayrton came into the function room, unannounced, the room slowly became quiet because he had such presence. He was such an iconic character, and of course, my career started through his death, and I would never have wanted my career to start in that way. But I think that everything he achieved in the sport until his death, everything that he's left as a legacy, is credit to his commitment as a sports person and his achievements as an individual. Portugal was his adopted home when he was not in Brazil. He had a home here. He won his first Grand Prix in Estoril. there's no question that the Portuguese people really felt a very close connection to Ayrton and everything that he brought to the sport. And then sadly, when we, obviously beyond his life, lost the Grand Prix being here, then you lose the connection. But I'm so proud to be here on behalf of Heineken and to have the opportunity to say that, you know, Heineken are bringing Formula One back to Portimao and to be part of this journey, because this country has played such a big role in the history of Formula One, and it deserves to have a Grand Prix.
Ayrton won here for the first time, and you too, here in Portugal. Let's get back on time. That was a phenomenal day for you, no?
Yeah, I think that Ayrton won his first Grand Prix in '85 in Estoril. I won my first Grand Prix in '95 in Estoril, and it was an immensely proud moment because it was my 21st Grand Prix. It was the realization of a dream, and it set me on a journey of another 13 seasons in Formula One. Now, obviously, I came up short in terms of not achieving the World Championship, but unfortunately for me, Michael Schumacher was at the peak of his powers, and on reflection, I'm happy that my career was at that time, because I entered Formula One to find out how good I could be, how far I could push myself, and I would rather reflect on racing against someone that changed the history of the sport in terms of success than to win a World Championship in an easy season with the best car. So, you know, I've always felt a very big passion for motorsport, a strong connection to Formula One as a driver, of course, and then beyond. And I feel a duty of care to be part of the sport as an ex-driver and to continue to, you know, we're not perfect, we don't get it all right, but I think that this sport offers so much more than just the competition on track. You know, there's a lot of good programs that Formula One have put in place on diversity and, you know, promoting women in motorsport and really showing that this is a sport that it's not all about drivers. There's an incredible amount of technology. There's so much opportunity in the business of Formula One, whether it's in engineering, whether it's in design, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in media. I think we can all agree that it brings the best of so many different smaller industries to the fore within Formula One.
Your first test with an F1 car was here in Portugal with Ayrton. What were the most impressive thing from those days?
Well, Ayrton unquestionably is the reason I was able to, beyond his life, start my career at Williams, because he spoke to Frank Williams, he spent time understanding how I worked as a driver. He ultimately, if he didn't like what I was doing, he would have had me replaced as the test driver. So one of the things that Sir Frank Williams said to me when he decided to put me in the car was that Ayrton had said that I deserved an opportunity in Formula One. So I'm you know, incredibly thankful for his words and his efforts that he made with me. And one of my, you know, one of my most cherished memories is actually having a beer, having a Heineken with Ayrton away from the racetrack, away from the test, and just, you know, soaking up what he had to say about not only the business of Formula One, but life, the way, his vision for life, the way he worked, and the way he tried to get the best out of people.
That was a tough season for a rookie one. Your first season. What were the big impressions? Because the car was so difficult to drive.
Yeah, the 94 car was a passive car. So previously in 93 we had an active ride, so it was a hydraulic suspension. And then, as you know, the regulations changed, and you know, Ayrton was in pole position the first 3 Grand Prix of that year, but was not able to convert them to victories for the reasons that we know. And it was a tricky car to control the aerodynamic. But as the season went on, Adrian Newey, Patrick Head, the Williams team managed to make that car more stable. And I have no question or no doubt in my mind that had Ayrton lived, he would have continued to challenge for the World Championship in that year and beyond.
You've had a big role in the partnership between McLaren and Mercedes, because then you went to McLaren.
Yep, McLaren, I spent 9 seasons with the team, and again continued this great enjoyment of racing in Portugal and testing in Portugal. We did so much of our early development here in Estoril. So again, to emphasize how big a part this country has played in the history of Formula One, and the early developments of that McLaren car through 96, 97 then gave us a winning car in 98, and we weren't then coming back to race here, but the foundations of the future success of McLaren were built here in Portugal.
You had a strong teammate there that won 2 titles, Mika. What did you miss from those days?
Well, I missed probably a couple of tenths in qualifying. If I'd been a little bit quicker as a driver, then I could have had a few more pole positions. But it was, I don't regret being alongside Mika. I don't regret being alongside Kimi. They were 2 very fast drivers who went on to win world championships, as did Damon Hill. So in that respect, all my teammates were champions. So it was a good benchmark for me to really discover how I could perform. So it's part of history of Formula One. We had some great battles with Ferrari, with Michael. Sometimes those battles were resulting in contact on the racetrack, like Spa '98, and obviously Michael was a little bit angry at that time. But we were able to have a cold beer afterwards and reflect on the fact that we're just 2 drivers trying to achieve the same thing.
And your last team was Red Bull. You
Yeah.
were the first driver for Red Bull Racing. How do you see the team now?
Well, I'm very proud to have played a part in the early stages of that development, and beyond my capabilities, the team had 2 great drivers in Sebastian Vettel, Mark Webber, and they went on to win 4 straight drivers and constructors championships. And to consider that Red Bull are a privateer team, they're not aligned directly to a manufacturer. They've had partners, of course, in Renault and Ferrari and now Honda. But I think that there's many similarities actually to what Red Bull have brought to Formula One and what Heineken have brought to Formula One, in that they've made the sport more accessible. They've made the sport more open to people that maybe weren't really sure whether they were interested in Formula One. And I think at various times Formula One has been a bit too exclusive, a bit too unattainable. But I think that, as I said, Red Bull and Heineken as partners have made it a sport for all, and I think that's why we're seeing a big growth in Formula One in the younger market, in the younger demographic, and both men and women are tuning in. So I'm pretty excited about the future of the sport.
Racing requires a lot of money to start racing, especially. How did you get that money?
Well, I was very fortunate that we had a family transport business that was able to support me in the early stages of my racing career, and then beyond that, Sir Jackie Stewart identified I was a rising driver when I was 17, and I drove for Paul Stewart Racing. Actually, I was talking with Pedro Lamy earlier about our battles in Opel Lotus and the lower formulas coming up through, and those were the formative years. And a lot of the Paul Stewart Racing team are still part of Red Bull Racing today, because of course Paul Stewart Racing became Stewart Grand Prix, became Jaguar, and then became Red Bull. So in the end, we've all made our journey together. But of course, as you say, Formula One or motorsport is an expensive sport. I'm now in a position where, with my 11-year-old son racing, I'm now reinvesting in the sport, having many years taking money out of the sport. But this is the circle of life.
What kind of tips that you can give to the young drivers nowadays?
What I would say to any of the young drivers, whether it's any of the young boys or young girls in karting, or whether it's young men or young women in cars, however hard you think you're working, talent will take you so far, but there'll be someone else in the world who's got the same talent as you. So you just have to work harder. Why would you think if you just do the same as them, you'll beat them? You have to do more. And I think that's something I learned as I went from my teens into my early 20s. You get to appreciate just how much more training you can do, how much more effort you can make with the team, how much more effort you can make with your sponsors and your partners. And I think a lot of the young generation think you just turn up, shake a few hands and head home, then the job's done. But be in first and be last to leave. And if you're not doing that, don't be surprised if someone else is beating you.
And how do you describe David Coulthard as a father, as a husband, as a businessman? It's different than David Coulthard, the driver?
Yeah, as a racing driver, you're totally selfish. You're focused on one thing, and nothing else gets in the way of that. I used to go to bed at night thinking about driving. I woke up in the morning thinking about driving. And of course, that's not really conducive with being a good husband or father or the other things. But there was a reason why I didn't become a father until after I retired from Formula One, because I wanted to have a more open mind. I still think I have a healthy dose of selfishness in that I enjoy the business I'm involved in, and I enjoy being part of new business. But that's part of of who I am. So I think that anyone that's involved in professional sport, whether it's motor racing, whether it's whatever other sport you want to talk about, I think that anyone who's married into that sport or born into that knows that it's maybe not the easiest, but I just have a commitment to life. I've got one opportunity, I've got one life. I just don't want to sit on the sidelines watching it pass me by.
Apart from racing, what are you else passionate for?
Apart from racing, I'm passionate about life, about enjoying opportunity, enjoying people, sharing a cold Heineken with friends, because these are moments to reflect on what you've achieved or what your goals are for the future. So I would say my hobby now is life, because you know, a hobby should be something you enjoy, and I enjoy my life.
David, one of the biggest problems in Portugal is the people who is driving and dying on the roads. That's the importance as well for the beer brands like Heineken to have non-alcohol beers. What are your, well, how do you see that?
Well, there's a reason why in professional sports, whether it's motorcycling, car racing, whatever, skiing, there's a reason why these professional athletes put themselves forward in the best physical state with the best level of protection to do their job. And they don't do that impaired. They don't do that having drank alcohol. Alcohol is a perfectly acceptable and enjoyable thing to do when you're not about to drive a car, you're not about to be involved in any professional business or sport. So, it's quite simply, Heineken, if you look at all of their messaging, it's when you drink, you never drive. It's as simple as that. And rather than just promoting the brand as a whole, that is at the front and center of all of their messaging around Formula One. And I think this is, all credit to Heineken as a company, that they want to promote that messaging. And we're here at this event, we have the Red Bull cars here, we're celebrating the return of Formula One to Portugal. But it's really important that all of the people that would think that they can have a drink and drive understand they can't. It's simply not something they should be doing. And we've got 0.0 as a very important product for Heineken that's been launched a few years ago now, but this is something that can be enjoyed amongst everybody.
And how do you see this role that Heineken is having with the motorsport, with Formula One?
Well, as I said earlier, I think that Heineken have brought a number of brilliant things to Formula One. They've made it more accessible to more people. They've come with a very important social responsibility message, which is front and center of all of their campaigns. They've launched during their time invested in Formula One the 0.0 Heineken, which has got no alcohol, which is something that can be enjoyed by those that want a refreshing beer, but they don't want the alcohol content that's involved. So in that respect, I think that we really have to recognize the importance of partners to Formula One like Heineken.
What do you know about this new track, new venue, Portimão?
Portimão is a brilliant racetrack. Now, I'm very fond of Estoril. I have spent many of my early years going around Estoril, and the area there with Cascais and everything it has is fantastic. But I think that for the drivers, Portimão will represent a real roller coaster of challenge. There's a lot of elevation change on that racetrack. I've driven there not in a Formula One, but in a DTM, a German touring car, and my eyes were on stocks. I was like, whoa, this is a proper racetrack. So I think that, of course, those that are loyal to Estoril, I respect that, but this represents a new start for Formula One in Portugal, a new opportunity to showcase not only the country and a beautiful part of the country, but a fantastic racetrack. So we're back. Formula One is back in Portugal.
Do you think Portugal will maintain this GP next year?
I very much hope so. Of course, this has come around because of COVID-19, but I think that Liberty are very open-minded to the importance of going to have a true World Championship. You have to be going to as many countries as possible. And I think that Formula One over the last decade was more focused on the financial opportunities of some of the markets, rather than really looking at, we're 70 years young in Formula One. And if we want to have another 70 strong years, then we have to remember the foundations of which has built the sport. And you know, I know that Portugal has been a huge part of that.
David, thank you so much for this opportunity and this
Thank you.
interview. E aqui está a entrevista com David Coulthard, que está de regresso a Portugal para apadrinhar, de certa forma, o Grande Prémio de Portugal em Fórmula 1.